If we do our share, if we do things, the sense of commitment and devotion and dedication will be rewarded with help from above.
My father grew up in the East New York section of Brooklyn, and he grew up in a family that wasn't very religiously observant. They didn't know that much, and my father went to public school as a kid.
When my father was 10 years old, he attended something called the Release Hour, run by Rabbi J.J. Hecht. The Release Hour was a program where children would be released for an hour from public school and given the opportunity to study Jewish studies. Rabbi Hecht asked my dad to stay afterwards and said to him, "What are you doing here? You ask such amazing questions. You have such insight. You really should be in yeshiva." So my dad answered, "I don't know, ask my parents."
My parents acquiesced and agreed to interview different yeshivas for my brother to possibly attend. And my father used to tell a story that I figured it'll take a couple of weeks at yeshiva and he'll want to be back at the schoolyard around the corner playing basketball with his friends. It never happened.
He interviewed for a yeshiva called David Leibowitz. And at that point in time, they met with my grandparents and they said to my grandparents that we have a class for him for Limudei Chol. He's on par, he's advanced for the secular studies, but unfortunately, he just had learned to read basically, so he's only fit to be able to go into second grade. And he said, "I'll go to the second grade." Now, to give you a picture of what that was, my father was 6 foot at his bar mitzvah, so you had a 6 foot person getting into a classroom with a bunch of second-year-olds and barely able to get his feet underneath the desk.
My father wasn't intimidated in any way of going into a whole new way of life. He just knew what he wanted to do, so he moved forward and he did it, and it was something that he was very proud of, that he was able to make these accomplishments, and it was the type of thing that was the hallmark of really my father's entire life.
He invited me over for Shabbos, I think 1 or 2 times, and his father went to shul all of a sudden. See, they admired him, that he was had that koyach. He believed this is the right thing to do, and then he went and he did it.
My dad attended BTA for high school, and post-high school he went on to YU, to Yeshiva University. He was originally not studying rabbinics. His intention was to be a math professor. My father was a genius when it came to math, and he was in both undergraduate and then subsequent to that graduate school pursuing a degree in mathematics. However, at the same time, my dad became very, very fond of Limudei Kodesh, and he pursued that at the same time that he was pursuing his education. He wanted to go into Rav Soloveitchik's shir, the highest shir in YU at that point.
They had a rule that if you were full-time registered in a graduate program, you couldn't be officially registered in the smicha program. And he went to speak to the Rav about it.
The Rav made a deal with him. He says, if you attend my shir, you got to take all the bchinas. He said, I don't want just people casually walking in on my shir. And he agreed.
My father's relationship with the Rav was a Talmud Lifnei Rabbi. His entire avodah and learning was to understand what the Rav was saying.
He was so riveted by his Divrei Torah that he remembered the exact phrase that he would use. And it was for sure transformative in my father's life. And everything became seeing life through the lens of his Rebbe, through Rabbi Soloveitchik. And his approach to the way he interacted with people is what he thought that his Rebbe would want him to do.
My father graduated with his smicha and a doctorate in mathematics from YU. My parents, after they married, moved to North Bergen, and my Zeta had started a small shul called Tzemach David. And my dad became the Rav. From there, my parents moved to Teaneck. My father joined a shul called Beth Abraham, which was also a relatively small shul, and they commissioned him to be the rabbi. My father was a rabbi in Beth Abraham for many, many years.
The community saw my father as larger than life. And not only the people that davened in my father's shul, but the entire community of Teaneck. There was a tremendous respect that they had for my father, the gentle nature, the respect that he showed everyone.
He knew how to deal with different type of people. These people you dealt with this way, these people you dealt with that way. He could tell them entertaining stories. He could tell them sports stories. He could tell them just jokes.
He was described by many as a gentle giant because my father was very tall in stature, but was very easily relatable to people. And although when it was appropriate, my dad could be firm, he certainly had a very gentle side to him. My father was always fascinated by kashrus and what goes into making something kosher and non-kosher. The early days of kashrus, in the 30s and 40s, there was a lot of things that were done that people just assumed were kosher. And my dad decided he's going to start looking into this. And my dad would call up companies and ask them if they could send him information on what stabilizers you use, what flavorings you use, what are the flavorings made out of.
We had reached out to different companies. One in particular said to me, we're actually looking to go into the business of distribution, and we would like to speak to you about helping us get a certification.
My brother went down to see this guy, and he was a non-Jewish guy. My brother had a knack with everyone, and they instantly became friendly together. And the guy said to him, Rabbi Senta, I think we're going to do some business together. We have a lot of product that we want to endorse that are in our stores, and that we sell our product to certain supermarket chains. Could I have your business card? And I'm going to be in touch with you. And my brother had no business card. He had no business. I mean, it was the first real client that called him that was of substance.
My dad, from that meeting, got in the car and drove over to my grandfather's printing press, and he met with my grandfather's partner, a man by the name of Stabby, and he said to him, I need you to make me up stationery. He said, why am I making you stationery? He said, you're a witness to a historic event, the birth of a new kosher agency in the United States, and you're looking at its chief operating officer.
That was the very, very beginnings. And there was the thing with the logo, the Kuf K, the Hebrew Kuf, and with a K in it, it became the trademark of Kosher Supervision Services.
Eventually we grew, took a long time, but by the 1980s, my dad had grown to the point where he realized he had to retire from mathematics because his true love and passion was certainly kashrus. He retired from Fairleigh Dickinson and pursued full-time his career in kashrus. And that's when we really blossomed. The Kafke really took off.
My father was trying to establish his reputation. So my father went to the Klosenberger Rabbi and he asked him, how is it that I can be matzliach in kashrus? How can I establish a reputation for myself? How can I make sure that the kashrus is matzliach? The Klosenberger Rabbi looked at him and he said, Rabbi, he said, do your job ehrlich. Do your avodas Hashem l'shem shamayim, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will make you matzliach.
Rabbi Senta had the wisdom not to rely on his own scholarship. He was a Talmid Chacham in his own right. He never wanted to rely on himself. He felt perhaps he was what we call a nogeya b'davar.
My father always associated with kashrus experts who understood what was necessary in order to do the kashrus.
We always had someone we always had to ask shilas to if there were shilas that came up. And they do on a daily basis.
It was always about being able to provide a service for the people, that everyone should be able to eat tachlis hakashrus, that it should be behidra.
My father always felt that even if he personally held it was mutter, and there were things that he had psakim from Rav Yashaber, from his Rabbi, that held it was mutter, but he said, as a matter, this is what the tzibur at large may want, and therefore he would be mevatel das to them.
People respected him. They knew that he was serious about what he was doing, and he didn't do it in an overbearing fashion. It was always with respect, it was with intelligence, but also always with Yiras Shamayim.
Everything needed to add up correctly. In business, in life, in halacha, it had to make sense. It had to add. It wasn't just, okay, it's good enough or it's close enough. It needed to be exact.
If there was a conflict and there was a question of losing a client, because you lose a client, you stand on the kosher standard. You don't bend the rules because it's going to hurt you financially. They're willing to sacrifice when they had to sacrifice.
Integrity was first, growth was second. Anything that he felt may be a challenge in which he couldn't do it at a point of excellency, he didn't do.
This was his secret to success in establishing and advancing the kosher supervision as arguably the primary supervision in private hands.
Behind every man there's a success, there's a woman who drives it. This certainly applies in that case.
My mother and my father were an absolute partnership. My mother, to some extent, created my father. Therefore, it is absolutely appropriate at a time that we are giving testimony and giving divrei bracha to the neshama of my father, to recognize that everything that in the past and that we will accomplish is directly attributable to my mother.
Honey was a big part of it, a part of its growth, a part of its everything. She's still involved, and that's wonderful.
This is true Yiddish anachas. A teres zekenim den evonim. That the true Yiddish anachas is to see the Masorah carried on to still another generation.
I don't believe anybody could have dreamed as to what my father was going to accomplish when he was 10 years old. In public school, I think the message is that if you set your mind to it, with siyata d'shmaya, there's absolutely nothing you cannot accomplish.
He's a self-made man. That's a lesson for all of us. We think, well, we are who we are, and we're going to stay the same way. No, you can reach higher. You can do things which you didn't think were possible.
The message of determination, focus, setting goals, setting high goals, and following through to achieve those goals.
My bracha to my sister and my brother and my nephews is that we should all continue to work in harmony in this following off my brother-in-law's method and motto and life goal of continuing to grow in simcha and in peace with all the kashrus agencies, and to work together and to continue exactly what he did his entire life.
Carry on what he did. When it comes to being an Eved Hashem and an Oived Hashem, it's serious business, and don't take any shortcuts, and enjoy it too. He wasn't like, a very serious like a person. Told a good joke a lot of times. He was a normal person, but he knew what his direction in life was, and he had to keep at it.
The Torah traditions, the Ruach Hashem, Ruach is the spirit of the Torah, and the word of the Torah should continue within the family, me'ata v'ad olam.
If we do our share, if we do things with a sense of commitment and devotion and dedication, we'll be rewarded with help from above.